what his idea was. If you get up to the top floor and she's not convinced, she'll say, well, it was very nice speaking to you, Dr. Berggren. Have a nice day, and push the button and you go down. So your elevator speech is that 30 seconds. Now if you're saying, Warren, I don't understand this elevator speech thing. You all understand what an elevator speech is. You've either been on the receiving end or the giving end of an elevator speech. You know, I'm this incredibly interesting guy who's got lots of money and can make your life, you know, blah, 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 blah. So that's what an elevator speech is, except in the academic context, that in 30 seconds you can just rip off what it is that you want to do. Now, we don't have time. Some of you have got proposals in the works. Some of you have got ideas. We don't have time to go through that, but I want to do just a little bit of an exercise here that could be slightly interactive if we make it. Do all of you have this handout? The message box here? Okay, what I want you to do is follow the instructions on it, which is no more than 10 words on each line in these various categories of what are the problems, what are the benefits, what are the solutions, so what, who cares, and who are you trying to talk to. And I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. And this is kind of the beginning of your developing your elevator speech if you don't have one. I recognize some of you may be at just an infancy stage or just here out of informational purposes, so don't feel badly if your sheet's blank. It's not like I'm going to call on each and every one of you. How are people doing? More time, or you got the essence of it? Give you another minute and then we'll dive in. Okay, we're not sitting around tables here, and what this suggests is that share the idea with your table. But I want you to basically look in a mirror and ask these questions. Are you happy with your idea? Was it tight? Was it compelling? Was it organized? Could you just almost reflexly rattle it off? That's a key question to ask in the development of your sort of intellectual elevator speech. Do you feel, you didn't do this, but do you think you could now take what you've written, what you've organized, and go back to your department and talk to someone confidently about what your idea is? And then, we haven't had a chance to do this, but would you imagine being receptive to the idea that you have written down or heard about? If the answer to that is yes, you're ready to get going on your proposal. But if you had to struggle, if you've still got some blank lines there that pertain to a particular idea that you have, I'd say you're still stuck in the elevator for a while. And what you need to do is go back and think about this in a little more detail. Because you're going to have to trot out this elevator speech when you talk to a program director, when you talk to colleagues, etc. Okay, who are these gals? They look like they're having a grand old time. You know, obviously this is a bit of a dated photo. Well, it turns out it's my aunt, my grandmother, and my mother. Okay, I'd like to think this was a joke slide, that they weren't that heavy of partiers. But people who know me say, Warren, that may explain some things about you. Don't know about that. Well, why am I showing you this slide? Because I found that one of the most useful people to try my elevator speech out on was my mother. And I'd say, Mom, here's what I'm doing is important. So, or as this elevator, or as this sheet, exercise sheet says, so what? Remember those skeptics that are out there, right? Only after your idea gets past your mother, or maybe it's your daughter, or just someone that is not in your field, but kind of is a little bit sympathetic, only after that, try it with your colleagues. And sit down with your colleagues and say, I've got this idea, what do you think? And then tell me about your idea. It's a two-way street. Okay, writing your proposal. Find the instructions for preparing the proposal and follow them to the letter. So this is a really nice looking, slick brochure. This is dated January 2016 from the National Science Foundation. Just about every agency will have something like this. Okay? You say, great, okay, I'm going to go read this and see what the procedures guide is. The table of contents is 7 pages long. There's 7 pages of table of content changes since the last time it was published. Okay? So this is like reading the phone book. But you gotta read the phone book, even if it is, in this case, a short one, 78 pages long. Because you can be qualified or disqualified for having margins that aren't right, for example. So read that. Okay, writing your proposal. It all has to be written. You've got to go through from block A down to 9. You've got to make sure you allow yourself enough time. But don't think that you have to start and write A, and then write B, and then write C. Different people will pull out different parts of the proposal and write them because they're in the groove, they're in the mood, they're brain dead and can still chunk this out, or they're just more motivational. You know what I like to write first? Oh, sorry, I should say some blocks are tough going, some are easier, busy work. Always try to write and upload something every day. Okay? For the proposals that I work on, I would say that it's like a donut. The hole in the middle is the narrative. That's what you've got to fill in. And all of this stuff around the edges, it's your vita, it's facilities, it's your conflict of interest sheet, all of these things, they all take an amazing amount of time to do. But they're the sort of things you can do when, like on a Friday night, when your creative ebb is at its lowest. Almost all proposals have many moving parts, separate uploads, forms, etc. I like to start with a budget. Sounds kind of strange. I don't even know what I'm going to be proposing that I want to do. You know why I want to start with a budget? Man, would it be cool if I had that money? So let's see, there's a great conference in Prague. I haven't been there in a while, and I really want this widget for my lab. And you just start to get pumped up when you say, you know, if I'm successful, I could actually get at least most of this budget, and I could do some incredible things. Support students, support postdocs, develop things, etc., etc. So I like to start with a budget because it gets me in the mood and excited about this proposal. And it's usually a spreadsheet of some sort like this. We've got a budget builder, a very nice tool here at the University of North Texas. An important thing here, proposals are not differentiated on the basis of cost, but in the ideas in them. Now, I bet our resident expert here, Dr. Hunt von Herbing, never rejected a proposal solely because it seemed to ask for a lot of money. She probably had lots of conversations with, that's too much money, can't fund that. And there were lots of conversations about, we didn't fund your proposal because it didn't receive a high enough score from the panel. But on the face of it by itself, proposals are not rejected for the amount of money that you ask for. And I would say too often people are not asking for sufficient money to do the job. I'm not going to say they're not asking for enough money, but sometimes people will say, you know, if I promise to do a lot, but don't ask for very much money, maybe they're going to fund me. It doesn't work that way. What you want to do is come in with something nicely balanced in which you say, look, you get what you pay for. And I'm going to do this project, and this is what it's going to cost, and I really hope you fund it. Everybody likes cost sharing. Sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not allowed, so be sure and understand that. But even if it's a little sliver of the pie, even if cost sharing is allowed, and you can get a couple $100 out of your department chair, and you can get maybe $1,000 out of your dean or something like that, it at least indicates that they're in support of what you're doing. Because the greatest support that you can offer someone is not attaboy, attagirl, it's actually some cost sharing. Now in the National Science Foundation, almost all of the time, cost sharing is not allowed, and in a really progressive idea, it was because Johns Hopkins, which gets $2.6 billion a year or something like this in national funding, they can cost share up the wazoo. And so they could really influence it because they could put in these huge amounts of money to support the project. And UNT couldn't do that. And so again, in a really progressive thing several years ago, there's a few NSF programs, I think, still that allow cost sharing, but usually it doesn't. But at least know the terrain. Know the terrain as to whether cost sharing is allowed. So tip 10, even a little cost sharing. Every funder loves to spread the pain. Often with foundations this works well. If you can show that the institution that you're coming from is willing to support, even a little bit, the idea that you have. Okay, organizing your proposal. You got all this stuff. You got all these blocks from A to Z and the numbers 0 through 9. So how do you organize it? Maybe it's my own odd logic, but I just like to start general and end specific. And I've read too many proposals that start in and say, cardboard fiber is the best thing to make a coffee thermal barrier on a coffee cup. And then at some other place it may say, lots of people drink coffee, quite often people don't like having hot coffee on their fingertips and things like this. And so they've actually talked about the generalities and the rationale after they've gotten into the details of what they want to do. So I just as a very personal thing, I just like the flow from general to specific. But, again, read that request for proposals, because some proposals the agency guidelines always prevail. And I don't think I've come across one more prescriptive than the Department of Defense proposal that we put in last year. And they had all of these sections and all of these headers, and there was just no latitude. You did what they did, or the proposal didn't go in. Key features of your proposal. And so here's some. It's not an exhaustive list by any stretch. Novelty and innovation. Bring something new to the table, if you can. Be nice to be on the royalty end of zippers in the United States. But bring something new to the table, but don't go too far out there. You're going to have to understand the agency culture. NSF is really quite interested in novel and innovative ideas. NIH wants to see track record, track record, track record. Shows lots of preliminary data. Don't go too far out there. Whose idea was this? Upside down Christmas trees? What the hell? I don't know where that came from. Current controversies, problems, issues of importance. Don't shy away from things that are likely to get the attention of individuals. The big picture in a good picture. I like, I've got lots of data diagrams like this that I put in proposals, but I also put in kind of what I call conceptual slides. And that space is so precious in a proposal that it may seem like a waste to actually put in something that's just a bunch of arrows and pictures, in my case of organs, of hearts and kidneys and things, as opposed to here's something with a mean and a standard deviation and so on. But I would say just weigh it, balance it. Don't be afraid of putting in conceptual slides, especially towards the beginning of your proposal, particularly if it's something that just causes the reader to say, oh, I get it. That's what you want to do. Somehow or other, get the referee to very quickly say, ah, I get it. Specific aims, a really important part. What exactly do you want to do? And why do you want to do it? Different agencies call this by section by different names, but typically in a proposal, there is a specific aim section. The NIH did a study where so let's say there's 40 people sitting around a room looking at proposals, and they pulled them one by one out into the hall. So these were reviewers that had the proposal for 30 days or longer. Took them out and said, under complete anonymity, we'd like your answer to this question. What did you read of the proposal that you're looking at? And more than half of them said, you sure this is anonymous? Yeah. I only read the specific aims. Of this 25-page NSF or NIH proposal, I only read the specific aims. So make sure that is really tight and really crisp. That's your elevator speech in a way, combined with some details. Resources and facilities. If you're long in the tooth and gray in the beard, referees will sometimes give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you're just starting out, you need to make it clear that you are surrounded by infrastructure and people that can guarantee your success. Strong word, guarantee, but you want to really make it clear that you are surrounded by individuals and have all of the resources. It could be a studio, it could be library, it could be widgets and framuses in a laboratory, but make sure that you emphasize that. Give a timeline. I've started doing this actually just in the last few years, and from the feedback I've gotten, people have appreciated. So here's a timeline. You could also do it as a Gantt chart. You could lay it out like this. Usually it's at the very end of a proposal, if that can fit in. Again, it's expensive space, but you know what this says? And here's why our little dude is down here. It says, wow, this person has really thought this through. If we give them money, not only do I know, but they know exactly what they're going to start doing in 2018 in year one. Look, not only that, but in the second half of 2018 year one. They're going to be doing this and this, but not this, and starting this, and so on and so forth. And so, it's not just to appear sophisticated. It is hugely important to organize your thoughts around this, because you're putting in probably a multi-year budget, right? And so what you want to do is make sure that you're asking for the money in the years when you're really going to need it. So I suggest putting in, like I said, some sort of table or a Gantt chart or something like this that describes what it is that you're going to be doing and when. Preliminary evidence, that could be important. What are your early findings, data, or other evidence that you'll be successful? And here I come back to this idea about know your agency. NIH is, I'm being a little cynical here, but people who are on the NIH, National Institutes of Health treadmill, get money to do the experiments that they've proposed, which they've already done, so that they can get money to do the next set of experiments so that they can have preliminary data. So there's this kind of specious sense of, if you give me this money, I'll find this out. They already know what the answer is, but they're kind of holding it back for the next proposal as preliminary data. NSF wants to see capability and competence, and preliminary data is certainly a good thing. But NSF, for example, and some other agencies are not so focused on what have you done for me lately, but what will you do for me soon.
I'm sorry, what was that you said again about NSF does like to see perhaps pilot data?
A little bit, but don't make half of your proposal what you've already done, because the tipping point can be reached, particularly in some reviewers' minds. Well, they've done half the project already. Why should we fund it? Alternative plans. Doesn't always kind of work out the way you thought it would. And so put forward a very short B plan. And I find very effective a little bit, just a little bit. You don't want to seed doubts. You don't want to sow the seeds of doubt, but you want to convey to the reviewer that you thought ahead, this might not work, and what am I going to do if it doesn't? So a very short B plan. How would you solve any problems that would arise? Usually in a 15-page proposal, I might have a third of a page. That is what I would do if this didn't work out exactly as I thought. Assessment tools. Some proposals ask specifically for an assessment piece. Increasingly, many agencies are asking for this, but they may not explicitly want it, but just expect it, which is annoying. But if you put in there, here's the great stuff I'm going to do, and here is how I will know in quantitative terms how I succeeded, that can go over really well. So just a little assessment piece. And it could be that, if you're doing a training grant with students, you ask questions as they come into the program, a whole bunch of questions. And as they're going out the door, having gone through your program, you ask them a whole bunch of questions. And you see if they learned anything. Now there's two reasons for this. First of all, you can learn and grow and improve your program. But the second thing is, if you, and this gets to the point of asking for money, a renewal, it is really effective to say, you had the infinite wisdom to support this program in the first year. And now look at how your wisdom is paid off, because we have quantitative evidence that this investment of money did not only what we promised, but even more. And so here's the pitch for the next year's worth of proposal. If you've got that hard assessment data, that is powerful stuff. Not just, it seemed to work out, or we published a bunch of papers, or whatever. But if you can show, especially any sort of training aspect, if you can do it. Now, most of us are not trained in assessment. And it is an art and a science. And so what is often very powerful is to team up with colleagues in disciplines where they do a lot of assessment. And this is, sadly, for me as a scientist, often not science. It's usually the social sciences, it could be psychology, it could be a number of different areas where they're education, where they're just used to asking people questions. Okay? So try and put in an assessment part if you can. You may want another grant, and now you've got evidence of your success. Sustainability. Not many agencies want a kind of open or an open-ended commitment or expectation that you're going to keep coming back and back and back. You may keep coming back and back and back. But often, by sustainability here is that if you fund this project, I'm going to browbeat my dean into slowly taking over this project by the time it expires. Or the university has given me a commitment that they will fund X percent of this project once it's been completed. Something like that. You want to give some indication this is not just one and done. Because on the one hand, how can you argue that this is this really great thing you're going to do, but you've got no plan in place whatsoever, except for the agency to give you more money to keep it going. So you want to think about a sustainability component. Now, I'm making your 15-page proposal 30 pages long by the time you get this all in. So there's going to be this issue of polishing. Know your reviewers, or at least their tribe. Okay, so if you're in audiology or speech and hearing sciences, you want to know what it is that those people look for in a proposal, for example. Are they colleagues, specialists, or are they just citizens? Avoid jargon or insider knowledge because the tribe may know it, but the people more broadly on this panel may not. And then my little sneaky icon shows up here. If you know who's on the panel, cite their work. Okay? So if Smith is on the panel, and quite often agencies will indicate who the panelists are. Smith did this seminal work that shaped the field. You know, Smith 2011. And Smith is reading this, well, this guy knows his shit. You know, this is really good. So, a bit sneaky, but you know, it's war out there, right? Okay. You're saying, man, I've worked for this for days. I've followed the Bergman's formula, and maybe I've spent 3/4 of a day on each page, and I'm just sick of this thing. The skeptics are out there. They're looking for some reason not to support. I'm not talking about the program directors here only, but the reviewers often are looking for some reason. There's so much good work out there, so many interesting proposals. They've got to at least assuage their own guilt for rejecting something by even inventing a small reason not to fund that proposal. So these are the folks you gotta convince. And again, this Pooch is probably the most skeptical one here. So make your proposal attractive and easy to read. So just some little tips here. Write justify. You know, if you see something that's kind of jagged along the side there, it looks like a student paper, right? But you look at this and, heck, it's halfway to being published already. And in fact, until NSF dissuaded it, I used to do double column with a little margin in the middle. And that was 3/4 of the way to being in the book, you know, in terms of how it looked. But you can at least put in margins like that. I like numbered headers, different fonts. That's probably 14. I would guess that's 12. I would guess this is probably 10, something like that. So use formatting. You want to do wayfinding. You want to lead that reviewer down a really clear path, and they don't have to say, where am I in this proposal? What are they trying to do? This also allows you to very easily say, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, as was previously described in section 2.2. Okay, so it gives a way for you to refer back to this. Now, again, know what your agency wants and how they want these proposals to be, but I tend to like numbered headers with variable fonts, page numbers, sometimes people forget that. Avoid small font. You may think you're clever because you can get more stuff in, but if somebody reads it or starts to getting a headache, you've outsmarted yourself. I could have said the same thing in one long sentence, but I like to make things jump out with bullets. And so here's bang, 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 bang. You could even number them if you wanted to, although the numbering can get confusing if you've got headers that are numbered. But I like to make these bulleted points, and it just drives home. No orphan words. What do I mean by this? Do you see the orphan word on this page?
Knowledge.
Knowledge, right. And I find, and I'll mention this in just a few minutes, but I find that if I make a pass through the whole proposal, looking for nothing but orphan words, and I say, okay, let's see, maybe even if I take out the, fill major gaps in existing state of current knowledge. So if I take those two words out, suddenly knowledge is wrapped around. And in 15 pages, I can often generate a paragraph's worth of white space. And I can then use that for something else. So if you look back, and I think I actually pulled these out of one of my own proposals, I hardly ever have, so that one ends right at the end, this one ends perfectly right at the end. I try and fill in all of that white space with information. No orphan words, yeah, I think. Attractive figures. Do some of you remember Vish Prasad, who was the vice president for research here? Vish, this was Vish's big thing. He said, make it look pretty. Make it look like Mona Lisa or you know, something like that. Well, I haven't quite done that, but you know, sometimes even just putting a little bit of a frame around and maybe a 10% or 90% transparency, just a little bit of a film on it, makes that pop out. Sometimes I will put shadows in behind so that the figures look like they lift off the page. It's all to help that person feel comfortable about the proposal and avoid that reading fatigue. Put in interesting tables. So here I've got a table with, again, I'm a biologist, and I've got a picture of blood cells and lungs and kidneys and hearts and things like that. It doesn't take up much space, but it just kind of has this organizational quality to it as you send it out there. All of this takes time. All of this takes a lot of time. It takes way more time. And now you're probably starting to see how I can spend, on average, an entire workday on a single page of proposal. Okay, finishing up, polishing here. And we're 15 minutes to finishing up. Okay, you've all heard of the importance of first impressions, right? For some of you who don't